Hi, everybody. How are you tonight? It is a hot day in mid-Illinois, and the night is not a whole lot cooler, but it's a lot better than it was earlier. So we're hanging in, and I hope you are too. I hope you got through the day, because there's more of it to come the next 3 or 4 days. Here's what we've got to look forward to. 90s, heat indexes up to 110, and high dew points, a fair amount of humidity, and then by Friday, maybe some showers, and then Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week, back in the upper 80s, and rain, pretty much. Rain. Oh, okay. I don't know where that went. I've never had that happen before. So we're good now. So the corn looks great. The beans look great. The grass, the grass looks great. I mowed tonight, and boy, I'll tell you, that was good, because it was hot today. I did the show outside under the gazebo. I had the fan going, and that helped a lot. And then, of course, tonight I mowed. When I got done with that, I had a Diet Coke. I drank a Miller Lite. I had 3 tall glasses of ice water, and I think I'm still parched, but I'll be okay. We made it to 10:30, and that's what this nightcap is all about. News and silly stuff, and not just about how my day went. I did want to mention a couple of things. What a great event the Carlinville Jubilee was. Our dear friend Jim Marcacci was over there selling his book and signing autographs and telling stories. Not only him, but also, my goodness, we had Tom Emery, we had so many others, and the jail and bail thing worked out really good. Sean was over there with me, and we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with the constable. Sean was enamored with the flappers, and it was really, really good. There were a lot of snow cones given away. There were a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And hello, Jim Marcacci, and hello, John White. Speaking of John White, Twisted Trail Winery is getting ready for their grand opening. More about that. You'll hear about that in a few days on the radio. But in the meantime, they're still doing their soft opening, and the 4th of July weekend is going to be good for them, as they're open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this coming weekend for the 4th. And get out there and have some wine. And, you know, there's a lot of places to go. There's fireworks here, there, and everywhere else. But, you know, one thing it's going to be is hot, muggy, and hopefully there won't be any rain for the fireworks celebrations on the 3rd and the 4th. I saw Obsession. Talked about it on the radio today. I don't know if you're familiar with Obsession, but it is a pretty nifty little horror movie that has the basic theme of be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. And it was made for about $750,000, and it's done about 150-some million so far. So I would say a lot of people like it. It's been getting good word of mouth. You can see it at the West Side. I highly recommend it. Superman's out there, or Supergirl is out there as well. Toy Story 5 is out there, as well as Pressure. That's another pretty darn good movie, too, with, of all people, Brendan Fraser. You remember him. Of course, he was in The Mummy, and he was in, well, quite a few things. Then he didn't see much of him for a long time. And then he was in a movie called The Whale, which won an Academy Award, won several awards, and was very, very good. And now he's playing General Eisenhower. And the movie is spectacular. And if you remember, of course, D-Day, June 6, 1944, D-Day was a turning point in World War II. And the weather played a big part in it. And that's the story behind this movie, about how important it was that it took place, and how important it was to know a truly accurate weather forecast. So I highly recommend Pressure and Obsession. A lot of you know, and there's a lot of things to talk about tonight, and they're all coming. A lot of you know that, and some don't, but for years and years, when I was away from the radio station, my friend Bill Harden, who lived in Alton, Bill Harden and I had a group called Gutbusters. We did stand-up comedy around the Midwest, mostly in central and southern Illinois, Missouri, and Indiana, and we had a great time. Doing stand-up was something that I started doing just at the end when I was out in New York. When we came back, I met Bill when we were both, of all things, going to the dealer's school for the Alton Bell. And we just hit it off, and he introduced me to a guy named Dick Johnson. And Dick Johnson had a comedy group called Dick and the Gang. And Dick was a comic. He was very good. He was funny. And Dick was not very generous, because, you got to work a few times for nothing, to get your feet wet. Well, we did. And then Bill and I took off on our own and found a couple other people, and we never made anybody work for free. But we had awful lot of fun. One of the people that we had was a guy named Reedus Miller. Reedus worked at Boeing, but Reedus also was a terrific stand-up comic, even performing at the Apollo, in Harlem, and doing stand-up pretty much over the Midwest. And I don't remember how we met him, but we did, and he joined our group, and he was our headliner probably for about 3 or 4 years. He also had a friend named Robert Kane, and Robert Kane was a ventriloquist. Robert had a crow, and the crow's name was Rembrandt. And he had a couple other dummies, puppets as well, but Rembrandt was the main one, and Robert was funny, very hilarious. And when Robert passed, nobody knows whatever became of Rembrandt. So I, about 5 years ago, maybe 6, found a puppet maker that I sent a picture of Rembrandt, and I said, "Can you make this puppet for me?" And this person did. And it was not cheap, but it was a fabulous job. It really looks terrific. And so in the back of my mind, I've been saying, I want to learn this. I want to be a ventriloquist as well as a karaoke host and whatever. Just basically to be able to use my crow, who I've named Monty for Montgomery County. Monty is the same as Rembrandt. I'll say he's Rembrandt's son, but he's funny. So the reason I bring that up is because, ChatGPT does a lot of things. And I've been telling myself, okay, I'm going to write a script and I'm going to memorize it and I'm going to keep working, the ventriloquist's alphabet, and we'll make it happen. So finally tonight, as I was getting ready to do this, I thought, ChatGPT did the Christmas play for us that we did back on the radio, Sean and I and Caitlin and Levi and Mr. V. So why not ask ChatGPT if it could write me a 10-minute skit of me and Rembrandt. And I just gave it 3 or 4, me and Monty. I gave it 3 or 4 scenarios, and I said, "Here, what can you do?" And by the time I typed, "What can you do?" here it comes. 10 minutes of John and Monty. I thought, okay. So one of these days, it'll probably happen. All right, so that's what goes on in my world. Now, let's talk about what's going on in the rest of the world, and everybody knows what's going on. Here we are outside. Thank goodness it's a little bit of a breeze now. It feels pretty good. Heat wave. A heat wave. We are in the major heat of the heat dome. East Coast is the extreme version of the heat dome. Expected through July 4th. Extended heat risks persist beyond July 4th. And when you're outside, be really careful. And hydrate yourself. Take care. All right, next. You probably heard the news, and a lot of people have been talking about it on Facebook, that a radio station group called Odyssey sold their stations in St. Louis, 7 stations, and including KMOX. Now, you don't have to be involved in radio to know the importance of KMOX. KMOX, of course, has been around for 100 years. KMOX has broadcast the Cardinals for what seems like forever, for the better part of the last 40 years, with a couple of exceptions. KMOX has had John McCormick, the man who walks and talks at midnight. KMOX had Bob Hardy. It basically had the At Your Service program, which, by the way, was started by Hayward Talley, not by KMOX. He started that about 1952, just in case you never knew that. But anyway, KMOX got more publicity for it, of course. But anyway, Odyssey has been sold to a group, the Hoffman Group. Now, if you recall, back about a year ago, there was a guy who named Hoffman, his company, the Hoffman Company, bought a lot of ground, a lot of the businesses in Augusta. And he had big plans to build a golf course, and he was going to make Augusta a new Branson and all that. Well, it didn't happen. But that guy, who owns a few newspapers and a lot of stuff, basically very spread out with his money, he now owns KMOX and the other stations, KYKY, the 7 stations that Odyssey had. So bottom line, we'll see what happens, but it's just a shame that, it's just a shame that CBS quit doing news, and it's a shame that KMOX has been sold. Who knows what's going to happen now? But I will tell you one thing that's going to happen, and that is the radio station I work for, WSMI, is not being bought by any outside group anytime soon. It's been family owned for 75 years, and it's going to stay that way. But I saw something interesting today. A guy that I used to work with long ago works also in radio. He works for WGN. His name is Spike Odell. And Spike Odell put something up today that I thought really told the story, because he was talking about iHeartRadio and their big let's get rid of a bunch of people, which they just did in the last few days. And I'm going to read part of this. It won't be long, but it does make a lot of sense. And it doesn't matter that it's talking about radio, because this works in practically any occupation you can imagine. This is going on across the country. As someone who made his living working on the air at a radio station, I'm obviously concerned with what I'm seeing. I've heard from friends around the country recently that they were quickly told they're done. Pack your stuff up and leave. Just like that. Some people I know in the Quad Cities market, now you know that's Moline, Rock Island, Bettendorf, Iowa, the Quad Cities, and he said there is not one local voice on the air in the Quad Cities. Now, we're talking literally a metro area. We're talking, several 100,000 people in the Quad Cities, and not one local person? Do you really think that a guy in California reading a forecast for the weather in East Moline is going to care if there's a tornado warning out? Or, really? Not one local voice. Who's going to do the news? What kind of news are they going to have? Local? Are they even going to be able to pronounce the names? When I came to WSMI in 1972 from SIU Carbondale, Hayward Talley gave me 5 pieces of paper. One was a couple were news stories, 3 were commercials, and they were names of people who are advertising on the air, and they weren't easy names. It was not Smith's Jewelers. It was Harstick's Ace Hardware, and it was Fallsgroff's, and things like that. And, you had to learn those, and he wouldn't have cared if I'd have not got him right. He'd have told me, but I would have learned them. But somebody in California? No, they wouldn't. And that's what the Quad Cities is going to be dealing with. Basically, it boils down to this. If it's all voice tracked and syndicated and not one local voice on the air, when you take the local voices off of your station, there's no magic. There's just not. And it's wrong. So as he said in his story that he wrote, he said people should stop thinking with their pencils and erasers and use their heads. It makes sense. So that's that. Thank goodness we don't have that situation where, there's nobody local. But part of that situation is because of the money situation. Every day, the difference between the amount of money the few have and the amount of money the many have, the gap gets wider and wider and wider. A lot has been made about Elon Musk having, being the first trillionaire, and even though the stock went down a bit and he's not really quite a trillionaire, he's awfully close to it, and $1 trillion is an awful lot of billions and an awful lot of millions. Here's the story, and this gives you an idea. If you were paid $1 million every day since Jesus was born, today you'd have 739 billion, and you'd still be 280.3 billion short. If Elon spent his money like you and I spent our money, it just doesn't compute. It's not the same. For example, if Elon says he bought a $100 million yacht. Now, actually, his yacht was a lot more expensive than that. But let's say he bought a new $100 million yacht. That would be like you spending $7.35. That would be like Elon buying a yacht and you buying a sandwich. When he buys a $5 coffee, that's like 3,700 thousandths. My goodness. 3,700 thousandths of a cent. It's crazy. When he buys let's see, what was it? Oh, when he buys a $500,000 house, it's like you spending 4 cents. When he buys a $50,000 car, it's like 37 ten-thousandths. When he buys a $1,200 iPhone, it's like 88 millionths of a cent. It's crazy. That's how much Elon's money is compared to us. So I'm glad I don't have his money, and I'm glad I don't have his problems. Because just think really how many people think, how hated he is. They think what an ass he is. They think how crazy he is. And yet, I don't think he cares a bit about it, does he? Next time you go fill up with gas, think about this. Well, along with how much a gallon of gas costs and what the price of oil is. But think about this. When you pull up on the right side, or you pull up on the left side because of where your gas gauge is, you have a guy that you should thank. His name is Moylan, Jim Moylan, because when you look at that gas gauge and you see that gas pump either on the left or on the right, that's him. One day, he invented that on a rainy day in the 1980s because he pulled a company car up to a gas pump, one he didn't drive all the time, and he just wondered why cars didn't simply tell drivers where the fuel door was. And Ford adapted the idea for its 1989 models, and then a few years later, of course, it spread across the auto industry. Moylan died at 80 years old last year, never patented the idea, never sought recognition or received any compensation for it, but he did pass away knowing that his helpful little arrow is known as the Moylan arrow. That's that. So how hot did you get today? Did you do a lot of sweating outside? Did you stay inside all day? These are, believe it or not, the dog days of summer. But what did that phrase mean? The dog days of summer, of course, is a colloquial expression used to describe the hottest days of the year, hottest part of the year. Technically, they occur between July 3rd and August 11th in the Northern Hemisphere. And that period of reliably hot and humid weather coincides with the rising of Sirius, the dog star, part of the Canis Major, the greater dog constellation, after which it's named. The ancient Greeks believed that the rising of this star caused the summer heat. Even the name of the star, Sirius, is derived from the Greek Serios, meaning scorching. And it is that. All right. One other thing. Yeah, I know, just rattling on and on, John. But I have got so many things to tell you. When you go, and maybe when you were a kid, you heard this expression from your dad or your mom. You wanted to go somewhere. Money might have been tight. Sometimes your folks might have used the phrase, and maybe you'd have too, traveling on a shoestring. Yeah, shoestring. Meaning, of course, to travel using a very small amount of money. Summer is for adventuring, so you might hear backpackers or campers talk about their shoestring budget, which is, of course, an idiom to describe low-cost travel. The concept of shoestring is a word meaning a small amount of money emerged in the late 19th century. A possible source of the idiom came from wandering peddlers who offered small trinkets like fabric and trinkets and shoelaces to people. And these shoelaces or shoestrings became associated with very small amounts of money. It's unknown who coined the term, but today anything involving low costs or using a small budget can be described as shoestring. Hi, Don. Nice to see you on here today. Butch, of course, nice to see you. I know that we've all dealt with the dog days of summer. Have you been doing any home renovating? Have you been doing any, painting or, maybe working in a room, wallpaper or whatever, things like that? There are a couple of home improvement stories I ran across recently, horror stories, not quite as bad as that Obsession movie, but you think about it, pretty horrific. There was a story about a girl and her sister who decided to renovate their great-grandfather's house in a small town in Europe. It had become quite touristy, so they thought, well, we'll make a B&B out of it. They needed to do some excavations so they could reinforce the foundation and the old facade. So they ended up, when they were doing the excavation to shore it up, they found a Roman cemetery with more than 30 intact bodies, an old city wall, and a moat with even more bodies. What started as a simple structural reinforcement became a 6-year major undertaking involving archaeological teams, the government, and specialized general contractors. Could you imagine? Obviously, home renovations can be challenging. Can you top this one? I doubt it. During a walkthrough near the end of the renovation, a snake came up through the bathtub drain as I entered the downstairs bathroom. I've never jumped so high, she said. The contractor on site had to get a bucket and a broom to remove the snake and get him back down the drain. She said, I feel like that lady in Psycho every time I take a shower in the bathroom. But the worst one of all, the most difficult one of all, the one that you hope and pray you never, ever run into. A long-awaited swimming pool installation turned into a circus when the backhoe fell into their 100-year-old septic system. In the driver's effort to get out, he spun the bucket around, knocking off the top of the newly installed 500-gallon propane tank. Flames shot 100 foot in the air, and the fire department had to babysit the flame for 3 days until all the gas burned off. There you have it. Could be worse, huh? We're not nearly that bad off. The last thing I wanted to mention to you before we wrap this up for another Monday night. Have you ever noticed? Probably not. So I'm going to say you can try this experiment. Next time you go into the convenience store, the gas station, or whatever, get a can of Coke, and then get a can of Diet Coke. Take it home, fill up the sink or the bathtub, or a bucket. Put them both in the water. You will discover that the Coke can sinks. The Diet Coke can floats. And I know you're saying, John, that can't just be magic. And no, it's not. Coke, calories aren't the only difference, basically, boils down to. Sugar, even though there's 200 times more sweetness in artificial than there is in regular sugar, regular Coke contains 39 grams of sugar, roughly 10 teaspoons. Diet Coke gets its sweetness from artificial sweeteners like aspartame. Because that sugar substitute is about 200 times sweeter than the real thing, they use very little of it, less than 0.2 grams per can. That's all they need to make the thing float, to make it sweet. So what happens is the density of those 39 grams of sugar makes the Coke can sink. All right, boys and girls, thank you for hanging out and being with me tonight. Stay warm, stay cool, stay informed tomorrow. My son David put something up on Facebook, and it's a good thing to end with. And I think this is just right. He said, today's mission, you can think about this tomorrow. Today's mission, don't suck. Restore someone's faith in humanity. When you want to complain, pause and find something true and loving to say. That's it. That's all of it. Of course, today he added, and thank God and the scientists and engineers and skilled laborers who made Central Air exist. That's Nightcap for June 29th. We've done a half a year's worth of these. That's pretty amazing when you think about it. Who'd have thought it would last that long? Thank you, everybody. Have a great night, and we will see you next Monday.